This is episode number 247 with watercolor and oil. Can I say master in both? I think so. Cindy Barron.
This is the Plein podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein magazine. In the Plein podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air podcast. I have goosebumps. I am so excited because we are just moments away. I think, what is it, another week-ish? I don't know, maybe the 19th or 20th, I'm heading out to Denver for the Plein Air convention. I look forward to this all year. It's a place where I've made so many friends. I learn so much. I get to see everybody. It's just like, it's a ball. So I am very excited about the Plein Air convention coming up. I think there are still some seats left. I hope you'll join us. It's our 10-year anniversary, and that means we're giving away, actually our 10th birthday bash, we're calling it. So we're giving away gifts to the people who attend. This is not something we normally do. We always have prizes, but we actually have gifts for everybody, and something that's a collector's item. I can't tell you what, but something that everybody's going to wish they had, and you can only get it if you're at the Plein Air convention. So that'll be pretty cool. Coming up after the interview, we're going to talk about all kinds of things marketing, so hang in there for that. We got number one art podcast 2 years in a row now from FeedSpot. Thank you for that. If you like this podcast, go give it a rating. Don't give it a 3-star or a 2-star or a 1-star, because that'll just mess things up for us. Give us a 5-star. If you're not going to give a 5-star, don't even go and give a rating, right? Okay. So we're just making sure we're clarifying things here. All right. And please, if you are hearing this for the first time, somebody forward it to you or whatever, go to wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to it. One thing that's happening, I do these retreats. I started doing them, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. And I did them because I wanted artists just to be able to get together and paint, not to have the pressure of being at an event and, competing for a prize, et cetera. And so I started what's called the Publisher's Invitational. In the beginning, the first year I did it, it was by invitation only. That's where the name came from. But after that, everybody's like, well, I want to come, invite me. So I just said, anybody can come, any level can come. And what's really cool about it is we've got people who are at high levels. Like last year we had CW Mundy, painting next to somebody who's a complete beginner, and it's just nice that we all just kind of coexist. It's a really cool thing. And that's coming up. I have one in June in the Adirondacks, but that one's sold out. There is a wait list for that at paintadirondacks.com. And then we have one coming up also in the Adirondacks. Last time I'm doing fall in the Adirondacks. I wanted to do it one more time because the beauty is spectacular. And we were able to get this incredible lakefront facility. It's actually an old camp that was built in, 1903 by this equivalent of a billionaire at the time. And it's an amazing place. You could paint there the whole week, but we go out and paint the Adirondacks fall color. And that's called Fall Color Week. Last time I'm going to do it in the Adirondacks, guaranteed, because I have so many other places I want to go. And we did that kind of because of COVID, because it was hard to get out and do planning. Anyway, make sure you come. It is a blast. We have about 50% of the seats are left yet, so it's a good time to book. But those are usually gone by about the time the Plein Air convention is over, because we talk about it at the convention. Okay, so the other thing that's happening, it's nice to get things cooking again, right? So I'm doing a collector trip. I used to do collector trips, Fine Art Connoisseur magazine, me, my editor Peter Trippi, and we would take people behind the scenes, oftentimes at the great museums. We've gone to artist homes. We've gone to deceased artist homes to see their private collections. We actually went into the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican privately. I did the first ever Facebook Live from inside the Sistine Chapel till they shut me down. There's a lot of different things that we do. I actually held, all of us attending actually held a Van Gogh painting in our hands. It was passed around to us behind the scenes at one of the museums. It's just an amazing trip, and we're doing it one more time. This time we're going to start out in Stockholm because there's a lot of great art there and some great artists we're going to meet. And then we go on to Madrid. Now, this is not a painting trip, and we are going to a brand new museum in Madrid, just opened this last week or so. And we have special entry into that. And we're going to be seeing the great museums, and we're going to meet some of the curators. And we got just so much going on. We'll go visit Soroya. There's a lot. Anyway, that is coming up in October. And if you want to learn more about it, go to finearttrip.com. Now, my guest today is a very special person, and she's special for a lot of reasons. First off, she's just a really sweet person. Easy to get along with, easygoing, but she's also special because she's one of the rare individuals who has managed to become, and I don't use this term loosely because it's overused, but she has managed to become a master painter, and she is a master painter in oil and in watercolor. So you can imagine that takes a lot to accomplish that. Please welcome Cindy Barron.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. Thank you. Welcome to the Plein Air podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This is fun.
So how does one get so good? I know you're a very humble person, but how does one get so good in two different mediums?
Well, I'm hoping to master another one, but I love art. I love painting. I love both those mediums. I treat them both the same, and actually they start out the same, but it's I think it's passion. It's love. It's what's, it's in me. I've been doing this since I was a little girl. So I did pastels first, and I actually thought about getting my pastels back out. So it's, I just love it.
So is that when you said you're going to try to master another one? Is that what you were referring to?
That one. And I'm having a blast. I got my charcoals back out. So I'm having a blast with the charcoals. And I have a wait list for some of I love the bison. And so anyway, they're gifts, and I have wait lists for people that want a charcoal sketch. So I'm a workaholic, and it's me, myself, and I in here. And what better thing to do than create art?
So Cindy, the one thing I think a lot of people don't really understand or embrace is how working in multiple mediums can really benefit you as an artist.
All right. So yes, I totally agree with that. And the reason why watercolors is handled different than oil paints and pastels. But for me, I have found a way to infuse all of them into each one. And that's why I think it's so beneficial for people. I mean, you've got to learn. You may find, like, I have watercolors that don't turn out, so I put the pastels on them. And then, my oil paintings start like a watercolor. So each one of those mediums has helped the other medium and has helped me to grow. And for me, the landscapes, when certain landscapes, requires watercolors, and the other ones require oils. And if it's too cold out, then you get the pastels and sit in the car. So yes, they help you out with design, the application of paint. It's I would recommend everybody doing that. Just don't tie yourself into one medium, because I think your brain is designed to grow, and what better way to grow and just to tackle it all out there. I'm now doing clay. So
you're doing clay.
Yeah, I'm taking a sculpture class
Oh,
because I want to sculpt a buffalo or a bison.
wow.
So yeah, I'm doing it all. It's
Well, I think that's fabulous. One of the things that happened to me, as you know, I host Watercolor Live, Pastel Live, Realism Live, and Plein Air Live. And I kind of started out as a landscape painter in oil. And I felt obligated to maybe learn these other mediums. I maybe did some watercolor when I was a kid, but I felt the need to be able to say, look, I practice what I preach, right? And so I started painting in watercolor, and I saw some techniques on Watercolor Live that I had never seen before. And I thought, I wonder if I could apply that to oil. And it wasn't exactly easy because there were, the watercolor is thin and transparent, but I figured it out and I transferred it into my oil paintings. And uh, I was working on that painting just the other night. My wife walked in, she said, "Don't touch it. That's like, you've never done this before. That's so cool." And so I think that, what I like is that it changes our brain.
it,
It's like we don't get bored. I'm more invigorated. I don't want to make this about me. I'm sorry, but I now keep watercolor out, gouache out, oil out, clay out, and I like and pastel. And so I like the idea of, when I'm in the mood for one, I just pick it up. That way I don't have to set it up. I've got a
right.
separate station for each one of them.
And that's exactly the way my studio is. I have a place for charcoal because charcoal can get really messy.
Yeah.
I have a place for watercolor that I'm sitting at now. And then behind me, I have my place for oils. So I have a fairly large studio. And so that's the one thing I wanted was a station for each, because there's nothing worse than breaking down and cleaning up and all that. I just want to be able to roll this chair over to the other table and pick up that brush. And I have room. All right, I'm going to give you guys another little helpful tip here. I have room in my studio that I exercise every morning, and all my paintings are lined up. What better critique than to exercise in front of your paintings? Because the next thing you know, you got a paintbrush in your hand. You just go over and switch one thing. It's sort of like here's your mind to check things out. I told you I'm a little odd, but that's what I do every morning.
Well,
But
what a great idea, though. I exercise in the garage, and I'm always staring at junk.
no, look,
But because you got to stare at something, and what a great idea, because then you're studying your work. So let me ask you about studio. You said you had a fairly large studio. Are you in a place like many of us do, where you repurposed it to become a studio, or did you come up with something that actually was designed to be a studio?
no, it's repurposed. I was fortunate. I lost out on so many homes I was trying to buy, and this one was the one that was supposed to be. So there is a family room, and I went, well, I don't need a living room and a family room. So the family room is my studio with the fireplace, tons of light, and then I have an extra little studio space that I want to start some mentoring, and so I thought that would be a great place to put another student and help them out. So I have at least two studios. The other one is a smaller room, but this one's a fairly large room.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you have any tips for setting up a studio?
No, because mine is still setting up. The one tip, no, seriously, I've got a little sitting area, which is, I call it my little Western little sitting area, because I love the West. So I'm bringing it to Rhode Island. But I have two chairs in there, and I'll sit down here with my dinner. I'll make dinner and come down here and sit and still look at my artwork. I spend most of my time in here.
Yeah.
And so this has been, it's still a work in progress. I've only been in the house since September, and that was very shortly. So now I'm starting to really iron out the kinks and where I want things.
Yeah. So,
I if one
you said pastel came first,
uh-huh.
then watercolor, then oil. Um, I'm going to ask you a really tough question, and you cannot win by answering it. Um, you know, if you could only do one, if you for whatever reason, God came down and said, "Cindy, you can only do one thing now." I should put an echo on that. And what would you pick?
Oh, jingo. Let's see. God, that's a hard one, Eric.
What's the first thing that came to your head?
Watercolor.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's where you spent the most time.
Well, not only that, watercolor is just easy to transport. You know, I got a little case. It can go with me on the plane. It can go anywhere in a you know, drop of a dime, if that's the right saying. So that painting right there is actually from the Laguna Plein Air event, and that one won an award. But watercolors is probably all right. I'm going to say this: water that is from the Olmsted Plein Air. Um, if watercolors is the hardest medium to tackle, and that's from Easton Plein Air.
Now, okay, so I just for everybody's benefit, if you're not watching the video version of this, there are some slides that are going on. So Cindy, I think you're right. I think it's the hardest medium. And one thing
Hardest,
that's really interesting to me is how, and I don't say this to insult anybody in the watercolor world, but when I first saw your watercolor paintings, I thought they were oils.
right.
So there's a lot of the same sensibilities, and that's got to be really hard to do because watercolor is like completely difficult to control.
Well, besides it being the hardest medium, I have a totally different technique. I do a lot of layering, but I
Uh-huh.
have to tell you, in my watercolors changed when I picked up the oil brush. And then I infused some of my technology into the oil painting and vice versa. They did the same thing. But with the watercolors, my technique is totally different. It's totally wild. And the one thing I try to teach my students, and when I do a workshop, is um, you're going to work with the mistakes. Every water, I like to work the colors to mix naturally the way they're supposed to with a watercolor.
Yeah.
And I try and teach my kids, that's a wonderful mistake that just happened. Let's work with it because that's going to be the highlight of your painting. So, there's always obstacles with the watercolor. You got to live with what happens with it sometimes. But I've learned, and that's what I like to teach with my kids, like, this is no dud. And then I also tell them, all right, if you have a dub, those are your blessings because that teaches you what not to do. You can't always have a great painting, so I like to teach, what happens in a watercolor because besides being, I'm saying it again, being the hardest medium to tackle, you have to learn how to work with it and work with what it does.
Yeah. And do you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to rethink how you're doing something, or you've just done it so much in each of these mediums that they've just come natural to you? It'd be like it's the equivalent of sitting down and playing the piano and then moving over to the guitar and then moving over
Yeah.
to the trombone, I suppose. It just all gets natural.
I'll be honest, and my students will say this, like, I do a lot of throwing of paint on the paper, and I know where it's going to land. I know what it's going to do. I know what each color is going to do with the color sitting beside it. So yeah, that has become sort of very natural. But I do have times where I go, because I do a black and white sketch of all my work before it sees paint, and there are times where I went, wow, this is going to be better. And those are just happy things that happen. But yeah, then I'll have to rethink my sketch. But on a whole, most of the time it works out.
So I want to brag about you for just a second. You were in town shooting an oil instruction video that has since been released. And you and I had the opportunity to be in my studio one evening, and you gave me some private counseling or some lessons, if you will. And we were in there maybe an hour. But the things I learned from you that night, and then subsequently by watching that video, I learned new things about mixing color that I didn't know for 20 years. And I managed to, there was a transformation for me because I found that for the most part, my paintings were overly garish. And you managed to teach me how to make my colors pleasing. And yet they glow, but they don't, they're not bitey, they're not acidy. Talk to me about color and creating um, the right sense of color based on how you consider it your foundations?
All right, so I don't know if I want to use the word old school or not. It's not. I went back to basics because my color theory in my head is probably a whole lot different than somebody else's, but you have to learn what works for you. We're all different. So as far as color mixing, my palette is fairly limited, especially with watercolors. There's probably only 6, 7 colors I use.
Okay.
And what might be surprising is I use black in both oils and watercolors because I don't like any of the greens. So I've learned how to make my own greens. I make my own grays with blacks and whites. I know how to warm them up. For me to go to a art store and pick off a green here, green there, and put it on a painting, it will not match for me.
Yeah.
I had to learn my own little color theory. It's just my head. And I think every artist needs to do that. You need to step aside and figure out what's going to work for you. So with color, like I make grays, a light, a medium, and a dark. And then I take one of them and I warm it up with some reds. And then I take another one of those and I make my greens. And then I have the blues and I make my greens. As long as there's a touch of that little gray in there, that's what makes the whole painting harmonize. And the same thing with watercolors. I make my greens with watercolors and I throw them, my watercolors are layers. And I think I showed you a couple times how I did that, but I know each layer is complementing the next layer because it's the same paint. If I introduce a whole new color, then that's where it throws it off. Now, there is a time where you can introduce like a little bit of a color that will help pop a painting. But for me, I had to strip away all those beautiful colors with beautiful names on them and go back to basics to figure out what would work for me.
So how many on your oil palette? How many colors? 6 or 7?
Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
7.
Yeah. And do you ever have that temptation? You walk into an art store and you go, oh, that's so pretty. I got to try it.
Oh my gosh, especially when they put those nice little labels on them and that color on the label goes, wow, it just looks juicy. I've learned, trust me, you can go in my art supply bin in the garage and you'll see every color out there because I had to go there. I had to try it.
Yeah.
And that's when I found out my painting just isn't working. I have not the luxury. I have the benefit where I'm a drawer. I can draw. I have that creative thing. For me to apply paint took, that was hard. The hardest thing for me to do was mix paint. So that's why I went back to basics. I went to the black and the white, the blues and the yellows, the black and the yellow. I don't use the only color, if I had to take one color out for the oils to go in the field, it's called transparent red oxide. And that I can make into anything. So, I mean, it makes a great little tonal painting.
So you're saying you could just use transparent red oxide and white as just doing a tonal painting, or what would you do to make more color out of that?
Well, transparent red oxide, you add a little blue into it, or if you add a little gray into it, if you add a little white into it,
Yeah.
it works really good. It makes a nice little tonal feel to it.
Well, some of the things that you taught me that have really stuck, and as I mentioned before we started recording, of all things, I was out using a color chart you helped me make, and I was kind of reminding myself of some things. And one of them was cadmium green and alizarin, where suddenly you don't have to make any warm colors. I mean, you can make like a mud pathway out of that. It's that plus some white. It's just so much range with that.
And then I make piles of gray, every time I start a thing. So I make piles of gray from black and white. If you take a little bit of that gray and stick it in there too, it's just like, you've got your yellow ochre. Now, yellow ochre and I fight. Raw sienna and I fight. Burnt umber and I fight. To me, they don't play well on the playground.
Well, you get all this harmony because you're using so few colors.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So those two colors together are great because you can bend those also to make it warmer or cooler. You know, those two colors.
So you have a distinction. I think this is important. There's a gallery that I don't know if you're still in it or not, but you were a part of it. A major gallery in Carmel, Bill Cargus.
Yeah,
Is it Cargus or Cargus? Cargus, right?
Cargus.
Yeah.
I'm still there. They keep me busy. Let me put it
Well,
that way.
what I think is pretty amazing is this is not a gallery that typically carries contemporary artists. They're carrying a lot of historic California painters, Edgar Payne, and that whole group of folks. And then in the middle of it all, there's this Cindy Barron that holds up. That's what I think is so fascinating is your work holds up next to those people walking into that gallery. Yours looks like it's 100 years old too and has that same rich quality. How do you get to that point? What?
All right, that's also my palette that I use and the way I apply paint. And like all my, I don't know if you can see behind me, those are in the making, but same paint, same color palette. But I think it's just the oh, how should it just the color palette that I'm using. The other thing I use, and I think I showed you this, it's called a Shiva orange.
Yeah.
And in the end, if I want to tone something down, like especially the blues in the sky, I will transparently wipe some of that on there and then wipe it off. And believe it or not, that gives it that old world look to it, gives it that look.
Musky yellowing painting kind of a feel. I've tried your Shiva orange, which is a Rishason color. Uh,
Yes,
I did that. I glazed with it. It works really beautifally. I find a hard time using it for anything else.
right, right.
Doesn't have much tinting strength, but it's really good for unifying a painting, doing an overall glaze or something.
Right.
Uh, and so what is your best advice? You have managed to get to a pretty high level of mastery. I don't know how many years you've been painting. We didn't talk about that. What?
Um, math, no, I've been painting, oh my God, all my life. I was this way when I was a young child. I think my first grade teacher told my mother that she's going to be an artist. And my mother's like, yeah, right, okay. But I've been doing this for forever. And so, all right, I don't mind saying I'm 66
Yeah.
and it's so, I don't know, professionally, I started in my 20s professionally selling.
So
So,
is it just so the original question was, how do you get to that level? I guess it just brush mileage, right? You got a lot of years painting.
all right, you get to that level if you really want to get there. I speak of passion. Like I raise pro athletes, and they had to have passion to get as far as they are, and it's that way with anything out there. If you've got that passion and that lust for what you want to do, you'll get there. Like I tell my kids, the most talented athlete isn't going to go as far as the one that has the passion. And I believe the same thing, applies in the art world. I hope I'm always growing. I hope I'm growing till 90, who knows how long we get. But I hope I'm always growing. And it's the number one reason why is I have that lust and that passion for it. And I want to do it. And the more I explore, the more I want to do. And I'm only hoping I live long enough to paint all the places I want to paint.
Yeah. What's the number one that if you could only pick one, where do you want to go and paint that you haven't done yet?
Oh my gosh, I want to do the fjords of Norway.
No, well, I
Uh,
might be working on something like that.
yeah,
Just,
well,
just saying.
we got to do we got to get on one of those boats and go through those fjords. I I really want to do that one. I want to go to Australia or not Australia, New Zealand. I know you went there. It just was a bad time. I couldn't go. And the Alps. I haven't done the Alps yet. I've been there, but I have not painted there. Um,
Well, it's
I,
interesting that your bucket list is similar to mine, and I actually am working on trips to both of those places. I have a big trip I'm going to announce probably in the next 30 days or less. It's not one of those places, but it's pretty spectacular. So, we'll compare notes. We'll have to get you to the Adirondacks to paint, and that will scratch some of that itch because it's so beautiful up there.
Yes.
So, in terms of teaching, we have a lot of people at all different levels, 90 different countries listening to this. If you had to give somebody like your best advice on what they should do to, other than the passion, what they should do to get themselves to the highest level of accomplishment they can, what are the steps to get there?
Um, all right, there's a lot of steps. You got to put the time in.
Yeah.
I've worked in a tool and die company. I raised pro athletes. It's like we're raising an Olympian. I had to be with them. But I can honestly tell you, there wasn't one day that I did not put some time into my art and my art career. You have to. I keep saying that lust and that passion for it, but you have to put the time in and dedicate that time to yourself and what you want to do. I mean, writers have to do it, cooks, have to do it. Everybody, singers have to do it. You have to put the time in. And when I teach down in at the Booth Museum in Cartersville, Georgia,
Mhm.
in February, and I always do 2 workshops. One's watercolor and one's in oil.
Mhm.
And I add it, when people tell me like, well, I don't have time, I'm like, no, you can make time. I painted an award-winning, I was so proud of this, to get my credentials in American Watercolor Society. And my kids were young, and I knew I had to get this painting. I only had a little time. I stayed up all night with a pot of coffee, and I painted this painting for AWS, and I got my credentials
All
from it.
right.
Spent the whole night doing it. And then the next day, take the kids to school and, do whatever I was supposed to do. But you got to put the time in. And, I'm sort of a workaholic anyway, but it's there. You just have to dedicate. If this is what you want, you have to dedicate to your craft. You just have to put a little something in. It could be, this is with me all the time, a little sketchbook. It could be just sketching. It could be, say you can't plein air paint, but you want to go sit by a place. You take your sketchbook, or you
Yeah.
take some charcoal, or you take some pastels. Colored pencils. Colored pencils are great, especially on an airplane. But you just do something. Like my mind is always in creative form. And I think once you cross that path into that creative, there's no going back. You just have to keep doing it. So you got to put the time in. It's time and passion.
So out of your typical year, how much time do you spend actually going on location and painting?
Well, I don't paint a lot in the wintertime. It's only because I have this Raynaud's thing and my fingers won't work in the winter. So in the summer, the weather here is nice. I will definitely be out there painting. In fact, this weekend, if it's good, I probably will. That's me. And that's locally. I will. And somebody took that picture for me. Jonathan McPhillips. He was up on the top rock, and he took that picture. So I think I got a backache that day from that painting. But now that the weather's changed, definitely. Winter's hard on my fingers.
Yeah.
I'll admit it. I have a hard time in the winter. Went to Utah with the Plein Air Painters of America, and we got a blizzard one day. And I had those hot packs, one taped here, one taped here, one taped here, in my pockets, in my coat pockets, that I actually started sweating when we went outside, and it was cold. So I've got little tricks I can do, but it takes me an hour to get ready to go outside in the
Yeah.
winter.
So and do you find yourself plein air painting in both mediums?
Yes, yes, yes. I only took the oils when we went to Capitol Reef in
Uh-huh.
Utah. And when I got there, I went, darn, I wish I brought the watercolors, because that's all I could see was watercolors.
Interesting.
It was exactly what I wanted to paint in watercolors.
Well,
So
that's one thing nice about watercolor. I actually, since I started painting watercolor, I keep I designed my own easel, and I designed it so I can do watercolor and oil, and I keep my oils and my watercolors in the same kit, and that way, whatever the mood strikes me. So when I was in New Zealand, um, I did a couple of watercolors, and then I did a couple of oils, in one location, and it was wonderful. And so I think it's a great discipline to try.
oh, it is. It is. And for me, my style of painting with watercolors, I mean, I have to be super quick outside. I can give you, I was Laguna Plein Air Painters. The easel wasn't working. So I just put everything on the ground and I stood above it and I'm throwing my paint. And a guy walked by with his kids and he goes, "Oh, nice hobby." And I said, "Well, no, it's my job." But he's looking at it. He goes, "Oh, you'll get better." And I was like,
Oh.
so that was funny. But I won the award that year. And so, you know what? I was like, okay, but
Nothing like the public to put you in place.
yeah. But mostly with watercolors, I don't use my easel half the time. I set it on the ground or I'm over it and I work really fast. So half the time I don't use the tripod in my palette. I just
Uh-huh.
put it on the ground and do my business.
So other than that, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you when you've been out painting?
Oh boy. Let's see. Well, we've had some bear encounters. I had a moose. Literally, I was it was in the Tetons, and I was so engrossed in painting that when I turned to the side, I didn't realize this moose had been standing there. And he just was standing there watching me. And so that was one of them, crazy thing. All right, so Bill and I went through Canyon de Chelly with a forerunner and got stuck. He thought he could go through this creek. Well,
Yeah.
he couldn't creek.
No, Bill has no limits to his thinking.
No, honestly, God, that's probably one of there's several, but I can't release that. But that was probably the biggest one. And then basically the rental car was returned limping. So we have a pack. I do when we go on trips together. He does the car, and I do the hotels.
Okay.
Because, many times he likes to take the car where he's not supposed to.
All right.
But it works.
So it goes on his credit card when it screws up. Well, Cindy, this has been wonderful. Any last minute advice for somebody who's taken on plein air painting? Anything that you find that you encounter with your students? Anything that you think would be a helpful tip?
Um, Simplify. I think with what a helpful tip is, especially if you're plein air painting, it's very seldom that you get the perfect scene. Yeah, there's perfect scenes out there, but there's very seldom you get a perfect scene. There's going to be a time where you're going to need to grow a tree or you're going to need to move a rock. And especially, when you take photos and you go back to your studio, don't adhere yourself to that scene without realizing you're going to have to change it a little bit, to walk your way through the painting and in the painting and let the eye, go around the painting. So the best tip I can give the students is don't stay picture perfect and don't stay adhered to what, the landscape looks like. You're going to have to change a few things to make it work as a composition.
So I assume you're doing a drawing of some sort before you.
Yes. Most of the time when I'm plein air painting, I just go right to it.
Oh,
but
you do?
I've got these, I got a million of these pads and I just, I do a lot of, that's charcoal. I do a lot of sketching. So it's if anything, the number one thing you got to always think about, and it's in any type of painting you do, is composition. And so get those drawing skills down and the composition right. If you get that right, your painting's going to turn out all right in the end. But that first thing, it's all about composition, and don't stay true to what that photo says or what outside says. If there's a big rock, you may have to just move the rock to get to that landscape that you want to paint. So that's the beauty of being an artist.
You paint by yourself?
Yes.
So I get a lot of questions from women about, what do you do to feel safe? How do you feel comfortable? Any tips for them?
All right, I go on my inner instinct. I have places here, especially, and I've gone out to the Grand Tetons and painted by myself. I've done some hikes by myself, but I have places here I love to go paint. I mean, they're absolutely stunning. But I can tell you, there was one time I pulled up to go paint in an area that I always painted, and there was a truckload, of people there, and I sat in my car and I went, no, my instincts are saying go somewhere else and paint, and that's exactly what I did. To be honest, I've never really encountered anything bad. I'm going to knock on wood saying that, but I never have. I play it pretty safe, but I don't like to live with the fear of what if. I
Yeah.
don't like, the fear
Yeah.
is paralysis.
You're
So,
not packing, you're not packing heat.
no, I thought
I probably wouldn't shoot somebody anyway.
no,
I'd
no. So Bill would tell you she could run a bear out of the woods if you get my dander up. So he goes, "Don't worry about her."
yeah. Yeah. He's the one that's going to run.
Yeah.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for being on the Plein Air podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thanks much, Eric. I so enjoyed this. So just paint, guys. Just do it. Tomorrow isn't going to wait for you. You got to do it.
Get out. Yeah. You're a great inspiration. We appreciate it, Cindy.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that is Cindy Barron, master of watercolor and oil. I think it's time now to get into a couple marketing questions with the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
So the goal, if you want to make a living as an artist, is to figure out how to do it. And unfortunately, it's not just like what was that Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. It's not true. If you paint it, they won't come. You have to invite people in. You have to learn marketing to do that. It doesn't have to be harsh. It doesn't have to be sleazy or greasy or salesy, but it is a good skill to learn, because otherwise, you'll have skinny kids. So the first question comes from Patricia Tabor Perry in Massachusetts. And the question is a simple one. Where is the best place to begin to market your art? That's a loaded question, Patricia, because there's so many answers to that. I think first off, I think the very first piece of this is to find out if you're ready. Um, I I certainly wasn't ready when I started marketing my art, and I struggled with that because it's kind of like if you're manufacturing a product and your product isn't good, you're going to have a hard time selling it. So you got a car where the doors don't work, nobody's going to buy it. And so I like the idea of getting some advice. So find some trusted advisors who will tell you the truth. And the way I have always approached it is I don't want you to say anything good. I want you to tell me the bad stuff, because I need to know what I've got to work on, what I've got to fix. And ultimately, the question is, am I ready? Now, there's different levels of people, right? So if you were to ask Cindy Barron, for instance, she's at a very, very high level. Now, she's a very generous person and she will, be very kind to you. But, her standards are high. And someone else you ask, their standards might not be as high. So you want to ask people who have standards that are high, because I think that's important. Now, you might not, you might go out there anyway because you might not get to that level right away. But one thing I like to do is ask gallery owners. And I did this recently. I sent a picture of a painting to a friend of mine who's a gallery owner. I said, listen, I have no intention of asking you to go into your gallery because this is not a ploy to have you secretly discover what a great painter I am. I just said, I I don't know if this is ready, and I need some feedback. And he was very generous. Now you have to do it with somebody you know and trust if you can. And he was very generous, and he gave me some really great feedback, some things that I couldn't see. And that's the nice thing. And I have friends that I will contact that I paint with, and I'll send them an image when I'm painting. I'll say, something's not right, but I can't tell what it is. And, somebody will say, well, move that tree. I was doing a self-portrait, and Max Ginsburg said, well, there you're missing the enough darks on this side of the face if you just change that one thing. And he was completely right. And so, but I couldn't see it. So look for somebody to give you feedback. Now, the other thing you've got to do is start with some questions. The questions you've got to ask yourself is, why do you want to market your art? What is your purpose? I did some coaching at Fall Color Week one year because it was snowing and nobody wanted to go out. And so I killed some time by offering some coaching one-on-one with some people. And a couple of people said, I want to sell my art. And I said, why? And they said, I don't know, because everybody's supposed to do that. I said, well, that's not true. I said, do you need the money? And in two cases, they said, no, I don't need the money. I have plenty of money. I retired. Put my money away. I said, well, why do you want to sell your art? And then they realized, well, it was really about recognition. And they wanted that validation that somebody was willing to pay for it. I said, well, can you get that validation some other way? Like, could you get it by donating your art or charity auctions or things that others will appreciate it, but you don't have to feel like you have the pressure of marketing and selling your art and advertising. And so that resonated with those people, but you got to figure out, why do you want to do it? What do you want to accomplish? Why do you want to sell it? Is it about money? Do you want to make a living? If it's, you want to make a living, how much of a living do you want to make? Do you want to replace the income you have now? If you're a heart surgeon and you're making, I don't know how much heart surgeons make, but you're making that much money. I'll go talk to a heart surgeon today and find out. They're never going to tell me. But the idea is it a little money? Is it a lot of money? Is it a retirement income? Is it a full-time gig? That influences all of the things that you're going to have to figure out. What about recognition? How important is that? That validation. And then, you dig into those things and try to understand what it is you really want to accomplish, because a lot of people chase rainbows that they don't really want to chase. And they get there and they go, oh, I didn't, I'm really busy and I don't like being busy. So find it, talk to other artists, find out what their life is like. If you say, well, I want to be like this artist or that artist, call that artist and say, hey, what's your life like? And they're like, well, I'm on the road 7 months a year doing plein air shows, and I never see my family. And, it's a hard way to make a living. I like it. I love it. But, are you willing to do that? So you got to be thinking about those things in terms of, once you get beyond all of that, then you're going to have to think about, how do I ease into this? What's my strategy? I think just start small, start easy, do tests. I love tests. Like a really great way to start is just to do a little art show, local cafe, local restaurant, go to the owner, set something up, give them a piece of it if they need that. The goal is to just find out, this isn't always about making money. It really never is. That's a side benefit, I think, because you do what you love and the money will typically follow. But there are things that you have to do, disciplines you have to do. So start small, do a little business, a little art show at a business or a cafe or something. Try that. Or maybe, try a little gallery test. Maybe there's a community gallery you can try out, or maybe, you start talking to galleries. But I would find out first if your work is marketable before you do that. See what works, and then kind of start there. The ultimate answer to that question that I always say in my art marketing boot camp is, I talk about, okay, very first thing you do is you start building your list, because if you build a list, then you can get more contact with people. Somebody signs up for your newsletter, you give them an incentive to do that, and so on. Now, the next question is from Emily Feeney in Illinois. Would publishing the name of high-profile buyers drive up prices? Well, Emily, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I had a really wonderful artist friend in Carmel who had her own gallery, and she had a lot of famous people who bought paintings, and she would take pictures with those people, and she would blow them up and frame them and put them in the gallery. And that was an implied endorsement. It said, well, because Pierce Brosnan or Oprah Winfrey or Tom Cruise or somebody bought one of my paintings, and here's my picture with them, that's an implied endorsement. It's not an endorsement, but it's implied. What I told her to do, I advised her to do, is I said, you need something that you can actually talk about. I said, well, who famous do you have that is not on the pictures on the wall that you'd like to be able to talk about? And she told me a very famous director. And I said, well, do you have any way to contact that person? She said, well, I have his contact information, but these people are hard to get to. I said, well, why don't you do this? You say, you were in the gallery, send a little tiny painting. So you were in the gallery a couple of years ago, and I'm so honored that you owned a piece of mine. I was thinking about you. I thought you'd like to have this little painting as well. And then wait for a response. Don't ask for anything up front. And then wait, once you get a response, then you can, if they send you a note or they give you a call or somebody calls for you, then you can open the door and say, hey, would it be okay? Would I have your permission if I could say I'm in the Steven Spielberg collection or I'm in the Oprah Winfrey collection? And some of them will say yes and some will say no because people like their privacy. So always ask. If you can get a picture with somebody and you can say, hey, are you okay if I post this? Or are you okay if I put it up in my studio or my gallery? Then that gives you something. And, I went to a hairdresser one time, and he was like a hairdresser to the movie stars. And he never said anything about it, but there were pictures of him with all these famous people all around. It's like, so, what's the story you tell your friends? Oh, the hairdresser I go to does, Donny Osmond or something. Right. Anyway, I think that, it's a good thing to look for every possible advantage that you can have. And getting high profile buyers will help your branding. It'll help your pricing. It will make other people want it because celebrity works. Now, if it's high profile in some other area, a sports celebrity or something else, it doesn't matter. But it should be people that, people know. I mean, if you're saying, well, this is Bob Jones and he's the CEO of SpaceX or something, then, maybe you have to tell people who they are. Everybody would know if it's Elon Musk. But the idea would be get their permission. Don't do anything without them. I used to have a different take on that, but I don't anymore. I want everything to be on the up and up. I don't want anything to be at all questionable because, eventually they're going to find out and you don't want to make them mad and you don't want to offend anybody. And it's just the best thing to do. Anyway, that's today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
It's been fun with Cindy Barron. Check her out at her website and so on. And I think it's cindybarron.com. I'll have to double check that. Anyway, join us at the Plein Air Convention this year. It's going to be really, really wonderful. 10-year anniversary. Just go to pleinairconvention.com to get your seats. Jane Seymour is coming in, speaking of celebrities, and CW Monday is going to be there. Alvaro Castanet, Don Demers, Camille Preswadik. I can't even mention them all. There's 80 of them. Join us at Fall Color Week, my fall retreat. There's always some pretty well-known painters there too, by the way. And come paint with us for a week. That's going to be fun. fallcolorweek.com. And by all means, if you're not a subscriber to Plein Air Magazine, go there. Just put Plein Air Magazine and put a .com on the end of it. You'll find it. We have digital edition if you're in one of the 90 countries and you don't want to pay for postage or wait for postage. And by the way, our digital edition has 30% more content than the print edition. If you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art, it's called Sunday Coffee. Just go to coffeewitheric.com and join me every weekday, 12 noon, Facebook or YouTube. Just follow me at Eric Rhoads and you'll find out more. But on YouTube, it's called Art School Live. Just go there, subscribe, and we'll see you there every day. I've got art lessons from other people. It's really cool. So remember, it's a great big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.